Honorable Minister. Honorable Member Mr. Figueira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the outset, let me assure the Honorable Member, Madam Teixeira, that we are not persuaded in your line of argument. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to be back in this House after a very long stay of almost 2 months of non-activity. Mr. Speaker, this is the robust legislative agenda the Honorable Minister of Legal Affairs promised this House, Mr. Speaker. This is the active and more engaged Parliament the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance promised the people of Guyana. Another failed promise by this administration, Mr. Speaker. This approach to Parliament, and by example, this very motion we are called to speak on here today, Mr. Speaker, reaffirms this regime's poor governance of affairs of this country and their attitudes towards transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, this situation is further enabled by the many rejected motions and watered-down amendments of motions brought by the opposition to this House, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, before I venture further into my contributions to this motion, that reminds me of our very own renowned poet, Mr. Martin Carter. I will leave Shakespeare to the big boys on that side. Sir, I'm reminded of the very line in one of his many masterpieces. This is a dark time, my love. Guyana, we must all brace ourselves. But with every dark cloud, I am comforted. With every dark cloud, Mr. Speaker, there is a silver lining. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to welcome back to this honorable House the Most Honorable Ms. Valda Ann Lawrence to continue her service to the people of Guyana. Further,
Honorable Member, let me just caution those who are in the gallery that I'm sure they were instructed earlier today that you're not supposed to bang the desk, take pictures, you're in the gallery. If you violate the standing orders, we will have to ask that you be removed. Continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those expressions of those who are here are happy and they're elated, Mr. Speaker, that good people are...
Honorable Member, are you challenging that ruling? You, as an honorable member of this House, one would expect that you would also contribute to upholding the rules until we change the rules.
But you didn't allow me to finish,
You may
sir.
continue.
Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues also in welcoming a friend, a comrade, and the leader of our great party, and soon-to-be opposition leader, and moreover, the President-in-waiting, Mr. Aubrey Norton, to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this motion brought to this House by the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, a sitting member of the Public Accounts Committee, should on its own be of concern to all Guyanese. Is this normal? It certainly is not, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe the people of Guyana, civil society, and other important bodies have missed the real deal behind this move in this motion. The Public Accounts Committee, as you are aware of, sir, gives oversight to the people's money. The committee that strives to ensure transparency, accountability, and good governance in a bipartisan way is now deliberately being politicized by the minister who should take the lead in ensuring governance. And moreover, good governance is achieved in this country. Mr. Speaker, politicians, and more so aged ones, should not use their influence or office to deny professionals their constitutional dues once they would have served. The venom in this motion, Mr. Speaker, the venom in this motion is partly birthed out of a decision derived by a meeting of the committee of members for the passing of the decision for past members of the Public Procurement Commission to be paid when the minister with responsibility for governance was vividly absent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, instead of doing that, the member brings into question her true role of importance to this very important portfolio. Mr. Speaker, the member's motion to amend Standing Orders 95-6, which deals with a quorum for the PAC to mimic that of Standing Order 83-5 for the Parliamentary Management Committee. A committee, Mr. Speaker, whose roles, functions, and objectives are vastly different, and as such provides for 5 members to be a quorum, of which 2 represents the government, 2 represents the opposition, and the speaker or the deputy speaker is the chairman. Mr. Speaker, even the blind can see the mischief here. This member knows full well what she is doing, and it is clothed in a veil to deceive, but we can see through the emperor's clothes. Light has shone in darkness, and the image exposed. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note the current quorum of the Public Accounts Committee meeting, Mr. Speaker, requires 3 members, irrespective of political affiliation. This makes it vastly different, Mr. Speaker, vastly different from all other committees of the Parliament, and it provides for a more apolitical environment. Mr. Speaker, this committee is not primarily concerned about party or party affiliations, but it is more concerned about doing the work expected to be done to improve the financial governance of this country. What its present construct does, Mr. Speaker, is that it compels all sides to be present because the work must go on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not what the PPP wants, and it is quite evident. They think the committee meets too often and that it should not meet the 2020-2021 findings of the Auditor General report in a very short time. After sending home 85% of the accounting officers within a month of them being installed in August 2020, this same minister wants to dwell on years. 1 meeting a week on the 2016, on the 2017, on the 2018, and on the 2019 AG findings for people who are no longer even on the job. Wasting time, Mr. Speaker, holding up the work of the PAC. Mr. Speaker, what is being proposed by the minister, who is a member of the committee, whose party argued consistently in 2015 and beyond that ministers of government should not be members of this particular committee because it does not augur well for good governance. But today, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing the attempts by the very Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance seeking to control this committee, Mr. Speaker. And she is a sitting minister. She was a part of the arguments put in 2015 and beyond that ministers of government should recuse themselves from this very important committee. Irony, Mr. Speaker. irony at its best. Mr. Speaker, this motion seeks, and I must repeat, it seeks to change the quorum of any three members. Any three members, be it that on the opposition, be it that on the government side. Any three members to 5 members. And not just any 5 members, Mr. Speaker. The motion gives specificity to who should sit on this 5. 2 from government, 2 from opposition, and the chairman, Mr. Speaker. A move entrenches what my friend, the Honorable Kimraj Ramdikan, calls control freakism. Control freakism, Mr. Speaker. And it further adds to the destruction of the guardrails of our democracy. Mr. Speaker, such a matter has never been part, historically, Mr. Speaker, such a situation has never been part of the PAC since its inception across governments until now, until we have this minister responsible for parliamentary affairs and governance in this country, Mr. Speaker. Until now, what a travesty. What a travesty, Mr. Speaker. This motion came to you, Mr. Speaker, like a thief in the night. Why, Minister Teixeira? Why did you do such? You are very much aware, Mr. Speaker, that this committee has exhibited good camaraderie, where there are amicable exchange most of the time. Why did you engage in this left-handed, and some would say sinister and pernicious act, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we are persuaded, we are convinced that this move and the intent of this motion by the Honorable Minister is intended to paralyze the work of this committee, Mr. Speaker. This is what we consider to be a wicked act, Mr. Speaker. It is wicked in its entirety, and we reject this motion, Mr. Speaker. This motion is one in which we on this side will always have grave concern with for the future modus operandi of this committee, for good governance, accountability, and transparency. Mr. Speaker, this is happening at a time when major government investments are taking place without feasibility studies, Mr. Speaker, where questionable spending of the people's money are done. This is the time the Honorable Minister chose to bring such a questionable motion to this House. Mr. Speaker, we have noted with keen interest that this motion is being brought directly to this House. As the Minister would have indicated, and it is noteworthy, sir, that none other than you, Mr. Speaker, as chairman of the Standing Orders Committee, has never met a single time. This committee has never met a single time since Parliament commenced, since this 12th Parliament commenced, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, sir, what is equally concerning and a matter of significance is the effect this motion will have by mere non-attendance of government members, Mr. Speaker. This is a hidden agenda in this motion. Mr. Speaker, we are convinced, as I said, that the PPP will stymie the functioning of the PAC, rendering it impotent and non-functional whenever they choose. I guess, Mr. Speaker, this is a new form of democracy. I guess, Mr. Speaker, this is the Honorable Minister concept of good governance. Mr. Speaker, the record of attendance of PPP members' tardiness in the present construct of the PPP, of the PAC, brings into question the reason behind this motive. The Honorable Member, Mr. Speaker, Siraj, absent 2 times since the start of this Public Accounts Committee. The honorable members, Madam Teixeira, Member Datadin, Dr. Mahadio, absent 3 times since the start of this committee. And the Honorable Bishop, Mr. Speaker, has been absent
Mr.
4
Speaker.
times.
Mr. Speaker, absent with the excuse is different from absent. The member must talk.
Honorable Minister, you need to stand on a point of order. And if it's for clarification, I would have to ask the honorable member to give way. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister.
I will.
Honorable Minister, you will have to stand on a point of order. And if it's a point of clarification, then I'll have to ask the current speaker if he wants to give way.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the point of order is in relation to 40, and that has to do with a correction, not a clarification. It is a fact.
Honorable Minister, honorable member, the minister wants to make a clarification correction. Would you allow her?
Mr. Speaker, if the honorable member would allow me to conclude, I will capture what you are trying to bring to the House, the honorable minister.
Honorable Minister, I will have to ask the honorable member to continue. So we can have that clarified by one of your other speakers.
I accept.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Minister, you're standing on another point of order.
Six, no member shall impute improper motive to any member of the Assembly. Mr. Speaker?
Okay, honorable Minister, honorable Minister, I don't see that as imputing. You could have the clarification. Honorable Minister, please, could you allow the honorable member to continue, and we can clarify this after?
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you and I want to applaud you for standing up and taking charge of your house in this business, the business in this house, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, Mr. Figueira, I didn't give you the floors yet. I was asking the Honorable Minister to take her seat so I can ask you to continue. I didn't ask you to continue yet. Honorable Minister, so you can have one of your colleagues who will present clarify that. Honorable Member, Mr. Figueira.
I appreciate you giving me back the floor, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the honorable member would have allowed me to finish. Is it on? Yes. Mr. Speaker, as I would have indicated, if the honorable member, Madam Teixeira, would have allowed me to conclude, she would have been made aware that the absence which the records of the committee of this parliament would have provided that substantiated all of the absences that I would have mentioned. It also included excuses from some of the said members. But it doesn't negate the fact that they were absent, Mr. Speaker. And with this particular motion that the honorable member is putting, absent with excuse will still handicap the work of the Public Accounts Committee with your non-attendance. Mr. Speaker, those attendance, I must state, Mr. Speaker, pale in comparison to the members on this side of the House who would have attended to do the work and the bidding of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, of which myself and the honorable member, Mr. Patterson, would have been absent only once since the start of the 12th Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since the commencement of the 12th Parliament, the PAC has been carrying out its mandate and meeting on every statutory date, and our work has been executed in a very efficient manner, despite all the efforts made by the honorable member, Mr. Speaker, of which my colleagues will give more clarity when their deliberations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we see this motion, this attempt, Mr. Speaker, by the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance. We see this as deliberate and calculated. It is a failed attempt to camouflage the intended action of this motion, as another attempt has shown to slow down the work of the PAC. Mr. Speaker, the PPP-led person, the Honorable Member, Madam Teixeira, even though she has been challenged for that leadership role by her other colleague, Mr. Speaker, and the mover of this motion, is to ensure that fewer meetings are held. And on occasions, Mr. Speaker, if they do not want certain agencies examined, they can now prevent the work of the PAC by simply absenting themselves from attending to do the work of the PAC, Mr. Speaker. As the evidence of their attendance, I would have aforementioned, states very clearly, very definitively, very pellucid, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are convinced more than ever that this installed PPP administration is not concerned with good governance, it is not concerned with transparency, and it is not concerned about the accountability of the people's resources of this country. Mr. Speaker, this motion is clothed with wicked intentions, and it does not augur well for the work of the committee and by extension.
Honorable Member, this is the second time you're using wicked, and this is imputing. So you'd have to withdraw that. And as I'm on the floor reminding members, but parliamentary language, I heard earlier another word which was parliamentary. I wouldn't repeat it. Go ahead, Honorable Member.
I'm so guided, Mr. Speaker. I will repeat. This motion, Mr. Speaker, is not clothed with the best intention, and it doesn't augur well for the work of the committee and by extension, Guyana. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I cannot, I will not, and I ask, because I do know that they exist, the consciousness of those on the other side, to think of Guyana, to think of its people, and not support this motion, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member.